After our session Tuesday, I happened to run across a text that declares that for many theologians in the medieval period, even sex within a consenting, monogamous, and sanctified marriage is considered a mortal sin unless both parties fail to derive pleasure from the experience. Let that set in. And after I read that, I thought, this can't be right. So I dug deeper, and it's absolutely the case that for many jurists and theologians of the period, that essentially they felt any physical intimacy between a monogamous husband and wife, unless it was solely for the purpose of procreation and neither party experienced any joy from it, that it was terrible sin.
Conversely, it's even possible.
Yeah. Conversely, Ezra Pound correctly, in my view, writes, paganism included a certain attitude toward, a certain understanding of coitus, which is the mysterium. The other rites are the festivals of fecundity of the grain and the sun festivals, without revival of which religion cannot return to the hearts of the people. And tangentially related, he also writes, a religion is damned. It confesses its own ultimate impotence the day it burns its first heretic, which is absolutely the case in my belief. As soon as you burn your first heretic, you're done. I personally believe that classic religions can be revived, though the time for that is running out, but that the path to revival is not through exoterism, legalism, and dogmatism, but through the kind of creative renewal that Pound, Lawrence, Kazantzakis, Weil, and Bataille, who incidentally studied for the priesthood for 6 years, push for. Lawrence's escaped cock is a fifth gospel backed up by the theoretical and experiential ideas, and Bataille's inner experience could be a start. And all of what I said, happens to have been confirmed by the current stuff happening in Florida right now. I mean, the kind of laws that DeSantis is passing are just absolutely insane. I think it's ironic that the Republicans are saying we want freedom, we want freedom, we want freedom, we want the freedom to make others sick by not wearing masks, but yet when it comes to other sexual freedom, they absolutely have no sort of understanding of that, and they want to regulate people's bodies and people's bedrooms. And that is really the worst kind of excess that has descended from the ideology and legalism of the monotheistic religions. And personally, I think if that's the direction monotheistic religions are going, I want nothing to do with them.
Well, that sounds a bit too political for our usual group, but
no one ever expects the Inquisition.
Point well taken.
Well, I guess sexually speaking, it's a prompt to raise your standards. I mean, if your standards are high enough, you can always be disappointed and not enjoy it.
You raise your standards for what?
A sexual enjoyment. So that you can always be disappointed and not enjoy it as much as you might have.
I see that you weren't transformed into an ecstatic bliss that transcends the earthly realm.
That's right. Therefore, it just isn't as much.
Well, we missed again. We'll try next time.
That would be a truly transcending of oneself to not feel any pleasure in one's erogenous tissue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think my own personally, I have hard time thinking that it would even be possible.
Yes, I don't think it would be either, but so they're asking for a superhuman accomplishment here.
Yeah, I mean, if it were possible, there would be very few people saved, I'm thinking.
Very few people.
Right. It would be either very few people or very few people saved.
Well, it's obvious, and I mentioned this to Sheikh al-Bashir a few years ago, that the pleasure of sexual intercourse for both men and women certainly serves to propagate the population, and that, you know, there's a certain age, particularly for women, in which pregnancy is possible, and beyond that it's not. I think for men, most men can procreate for quite a few more years younger. But I said to Sheikh al-Bashir, I said, I think the fact that interest in sexual activity beyond the procreation episode of your life was probably a design flaw. And he insisted quite strenuously that it was not. He didn't think, but at any rate, I remember saying that.
Yeah, you'd think that if the only purpose were to procreate, that erogenous tissue would atrophy.
Yeah, after about age 40 or something.
Yeah, exactly.
45, and then you'd forget about that and go on with the rest of your life.
But you know, you can be sure that it's valid to say that God really enjoys creation, and so he set it up so that we would enjoy procreation.
Well,
very good point.
Well, I think, why are some of these ultra conservatives so angry? And maybe you know what, you're onto something there, Sidi Talha, that they all just have atrophied erogenous tissue.
Well, I think they have atrophied conscience.
Yeah, that too.
Now, all this stuff, as soon as it's like, it's not just when the day it burns its first heretic, it's as soon as that it switches from a spiritual pursuit to a moralism that is focused on other people's sins rather than their own.
Absolutely. I mean, if you read Pound's statement in context, he's making it clear that it's not just the physical act of burning the heretic, but, you know, as soon as you think about burning the heretic, as soon as you think about punishing someone for doing something that's their own business, as soon as you even come up with
a different belief,
right, as soon as that concept of heresy enters your mind, you've suddenly switched from monotheism to dualism. And that's one thing that I find very interesting in his metaphysical essays, where he says that the irony of polytheism and ancient pagan religions is that the external form of pluralism always has a unity underneath, whereas most monotheistic religions, at least in practice, are actually dualist.
Sure. Religions are almost always dualist. I mean, the human experience is dualist. You know, you just need to see something more than that for religion to work. I mean, there's no crime in dualism. We're doomed to it. But if you see it, you don't get tricked by it so much. But if you think it's just the way things are, when we think that something is just the way that things are, we're not saying that with reference even to the external world. We're only saying that with reference to our internal representation of the world. And that is always intimate and immediately available for snap judgments against people. You know, you don't need no stinking evidence because it clashes with what's in your head, so it's wrong. I don't think I interact with the world in any other way than through my representation of it. So
I think human mental thinking is discursive, and it has a subject and an object in almost in any kind of argument that you could have in it.
I'm not sure that imagination is inherently discursive.
Well, I'm talking about thinking.
Oh, well, thinking, yeah.
I'm not talking about realization of, you might say, things that are brought to you by the eye of the heart.
Yeah, or even by just the recognition of certain possibilities. You can imagine a unicorn, even though it's not real.
Right.
But
Well,
you know, what we usually condemn thinking for is thinking that is in fact discursive. We think in words. We're, you know, and we're the only ones, as far as I know, that are cursed with that.
well, just as being is the principle of all manifestation, silence is the principle of all expression.
Well,
And neither of those, yes, right. So you might say you have to have elevated your viewpoint to some extent to get beyond rational expression of human thinking.
Right. And that's because you will have elevated your internal model of the cosmos, as it were.
Right.
well, to what degree is exoterism legitimate?
Did you say exoterism or
Yes.
esoteric?
Exoterism.
To the degree that one is not totally realized.
I would say exoterism is valid so long as it is functioning properly, that
Yeah.
it's pointing to the true north of esoterism. As soon as a compass starts pointing east, west, or south, you throw away the compass.
Well, I'm thinking about the religious wars of history and the people who have gone to war with the proposition that they have the truth. God knows the truth to be brought to these other people who need to be disabused of the practice that they're using so that their souls can be saved. That's why we're marching.
Or they need to be eradicated from the earth so that the kingdom of God can come.
Well,
that's a particular perversion there.
You're taking it one step further, or maybe more than a step further than I did. But
yes, I suppose. But that's where it leads. Finally, because those others are going to be incorrigible, and you're not going to be able to change their minds and save them.
I think as exoterism works when there are people in control, the leaders of the religion have esoteric insights and can guide it properly, but it certainly has a role for the large numbers of followers who are not inclined toward esoteric perspective or teaching practice.
And does that include spreading their religion by the sword?
Of course not.
I
didn't ask you.
Sorry.
I'm asking you now.
You're asking me that.
No, I'm asking the soldiers in the name of God.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously, God has commanded different prophets to defend
That's an exoteric point. That's an esoteric point of view.
It is, but it's also an inevitable one if it's a question of preserving the form of the religion from enemies.
No, excuse me. It is in fact an exoteric point of view. If you can look at the Quran saying to every people God has sent a prophet or a messenger.
Yeah.
But Muhammad, as a political as well as spiritual leader, organized an army to defend the Muslims from attack by the Meccans, and it was self-defense.
Yes, exactly. That's the whole point. We have a right to self-defense, just because it's in the nature of things. But if you have what you know to be an esoteric truth supported by an exoteric form, you don't want those other people to come along and destroy the form because they don't get the inner essence of it, and they go together, and it would be a great, it's like, I mean, what do you want to, there's a whole bunch of people that are benefiting spiritually from this thing, and in a very real sense, God has willed this form. So, I mean, it ought to be protected, not necessarily with swords, but it still ought to be protected.
Saint Alexander Nevsky led the Teutonic nobles out onto the sea of ice, knowing that they would probably fall through its surface and drown.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of people that have gone into battle not expecting to survive because they really believed in the cause. And if they were lucky, their cause was just. Otherwise, I don't know what happened to them.
I tend to think that we either need radical secularism or radical pluralism, a reinvigoration of the pagan mindset, because the former at least takes away the ability for the religious to do quite as much harm, and the latter allows for all the possibilities, including monotheism under its umbrella. I mean, in the more pluralistic societies of the ancient world, you certainly had wars, but they weren't religiously inspired for the most part, because
for the most part, yeah.
For the most part, because outside of, let's say, the Persian Empire, where all of this monotheistic stuff started, really there was room for a multitude of metaphysical views. If anything, in the past there might have been differences, in terms of practice, but it was normal to have differences of views and differences of practice and worship of different gods, even within one household. And the monotheistic religions completely obliterated that. And regarding the first point regarding secularism, I sort of think in some ways it's the best thing to happen to religion, because we wouldn't have someone like a Pope Francis right now, probably, if the Catholic Church still had political power like it did in the medieval period. And so someone like Francis, who doesn't have political power, is able to come out there as a person of principle and say, I'm against war. But yet, on the other hand, in Russia, where the bishops still have a certain degree of political influence, you see how they're getting all tied up in this unjust war in Ukraine.
Oh, well, yeah. But the other thing is that pluralism should admit secularism as one of the possibilities. And it may be hard to understand, but secularism is actually protective to religion.
Yes.
Because it gives people an alternative that, which means that they always have that choice to make. And when they choose a religion, it's because they choose a religion. And it's, it protects religions from each other. If your government is secular, then, it provides a society in which you can have many religions.
Yeah.
If as long as you do it better than the French do, who think that secularism is a gospel that, is a religion and needs to be protected.
Right, of course. When you start elevating secularism to a kind of religious form of polis, a secular polis, and excluding those that are religious, or when you start saying the atheist metaphysic is the only true metaphysic, then you've just simply adopted all the worst attitudes and behaviors of the religious.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know any tradition that doesn't affirm the validity of other traditions. I know of people that are members of a religion that don't affirm it, but the fact of the matter is, if you look in the scripture of almost every tradition that I know of, they affirm the legitimacy of other traditions. And it says that our prophet does.
I don't know that I'd agree with that. I would say
it's not quite that simple, because, well, go ahead, say that.
I would just simply say that you might find certain mystics or philosophers within Christianity, Judaism, and Islam that may say all paths are valid, but for the most part, those have been the exception rather than the rule. And you have far too many examples of not only Muslims and Christians, or, Christians and Jews, or Muslims and Hindus fighting one another, but you also have Muslims and Christians killing one another in violent bloodshed for no reason whatsoever.
They think so.
They would be killing each other without the benefit of religion altogether.
Well, I think
So to lay that,
that's a very strange phrase. Let's look at that phrase.
All right, what was that phrase?
Killing each other without the benefits of religion.
Well, that's right. I mean, it wouldn't be because of religion that they were killing each other.
Okay, yeah, point.
They wanted someone else's wealth, or they wanted their property, or they wanted something or other else. And they might use religion as an excuse for it. But the fact of the matter is, if you go to the scriptures, Christ says, in my Father's kingdom are many mansions.
Yeah. But if you're literal,
you find quote after quote after quote through the Gospels of Christ, who is supposedly the voice of the word in that tradition.
But if you're a literalist, how do you get past no one cometh to the Father save through me?
I can do that.
I think that's understandable, because he is
I understand it, but I'm not a literalist.
Well, if you're not a literalist, I mean, the phrase is true.
Yes.
In the context of Christianity, Jesus is God, and no one comes to God except through God.
Yeah.
So where's the problem?
It was particularly true for Jesus to say it,
Indeed.
Well, and so I really think that, you're erring in laying at the door of monotheism or of religion in general all of the faults that actually are brought to it by people's misunderstanding of it.
Well, but you can't have a religious people without people in it.
The people all have faults.
People that are the problem.
There is no religion without people. Religion etymologically means a binding together. It's a binding together of a community of people.
Whoever said there was?
There was what?
That there was a religion without people.
Well, then you can't separate it. If the people of a certain religion are claiming to make a war or do horrible things in the name of that religion, then that religion has to be held culpable.
Well, I don't think so.
Maybe.
I don't think so at all. They may be very much opposed to it.
It's what people think their religion is that's culpable.
Right. I mean, you can corrupt the good, and the good corrupted becomes the worst.
Yeah.
That's true. But that is a corruption, not the essence of it.
But it's an inevitable corruption that'll occur as soon as you get people involved.
Well,
yeah, I used to be naive. I did my undergraduate thesis on, or it was projected to be on how Buddhism could save the world. And, halfway through the thesis, I had to change it because I realized that, even actually existing Buddhist countries and governments were involved in just as many horrible things as the Christians, Muslims, and everyone else. Even though on the surface of it, you would think, Buddhism, that's going to lead to a lot of, love and peace. But people are people.
Yeah,
and
that's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, you can't say, though, that because they're people, they do not have the potential to be saved.
No, they got the potential. Sure.
Right. And
in principle, and whether they realize it or not, they're part divine.
Being religions, if that were the case.
Oh, I absolutely believe that everyone not only has the potential to be saved, but will be saved. I think one of the most vicious errors of religions is claiming that there's something as eternal damnation.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time. Some people take more and some people less time to get things straightened out spiritually, just like some people take more time to get things straightened out psychologically.
Right. And to notice that there's a
eternal damnation, to me, seems a little strange.
Yes, it is.
Because it would give that eternality
Right.
to something that is beneath that, I would think. I would think that it's not eternal, it's perpetual.
Well, it's as long as it lasts, whatever it is. And
well, perpetual is not the same as eternal.
No, it's
eternal
not.
is outside of time.
Yeah.
Perpetual is just the extension of it, sort of like two follows one, and three follows two, and so on and so on and so forth, and you never come to the end of it.
Well, I've mentioned this before, but I like to think of, damnation as a room with the door locked from the inside, and you're running around in circles saying, let me out, for all these billions, what you think are billions of years, and you never realize that you have within yourself the power to renounce the nafs and just simply open that door.
And that's true before death too.
One view of that. There's other views too of other possible traps that keep one in that place. But at any rate,
but God's mercy never dies.
Right.
To presume to know what God is going to do over the course of an indefinitely long period of time confines God. It confines the divine mercy, and it just makes a presumption that, well, it's either black or white, and you're either good or evil, and if you die when you're evil, you stay that way. Who says there's no salvation in purgatory?
Well, I read a description of this.
The very nature of purgatory is.
Yeah, exactly. It's to purge.
That's what it's purpose. That this is to say everyone goes to purgatory.
I read a description of this. I think it might have been in George MacDonald, where, obviously it can't be taken literally, but he says, God is sitting there crying, weeping for the people that aren't yet saved, while all the rest of creation, down to the blade of grass, is already saved. But because of the gift of free will, some of mankind is destined not to be saved right away. And he's crying and weeping and wants those people to be saved. But because of free will, man has to choose to save himself. And some people don't realize that they can actually pull themselves up by their bootstraps and save themselves.
Yeah. It's whether or not God actually sheds tears. The point is that if God is a loving God, then he cares.
Well, I mean, since he is being, he has all of the possibilities of being. And of course, one of the possibilities is his concern for man.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Well, yeah, but
that is the totality of God.
But if God didn't love all the creation, it wouldn't exist.
It wouldn't come to an end if he was happy with it, perhaps.
Well, he may get impatient to love the next creation. Who knows?
The next.
I mean, it is cyclic. I mean, the end of this world is the beginning of the next.
Well, let's face it, there are teachings like that. They sound beautiful and true, but we don't know. Look at us talking about the Manvantara and all of this. Well, you know, somebody wrote that down, and they were trying to describe a reality, and I'm sure that there is a reality behind what they're describing, but I myself don't know anything about it.
Well, there are saints within our tradition that, in fact, I mean, Martin Lings talks about lights from the next cycle that are already entering the earth or our environment.
I'm not saying that's not true. I'm just saying I can't say it's true.
Well, I know, but the fact of the matter is that, you know, you don't know anything until you know it.
Well, that's right.
Pharaoh would say.
Sure. But, you know, if I tie my horse too tightly to the need to have the truth, and I'm going to end up in a religious war, even if it's only just, you know, arguing with somebody. And it's that humility to realize that no matter what you have realized, no matter what you have understood from the scriptures and things like that, that there's always stuff you don't know. And that if you were in a state where you really knew everything, you wouldn't be what you are.
Well, many of the saints who have read, and many of the avatars and so on and so forth, they say that everything that you gain within this life is, you might say, permanent.
You might, except of course you can't take it with you. The only thing you can take with you is that which has always been with you, and you could say that's one's being. And religion helps purify the being, so that, or that for that matter, death leaves behind that which isn't pure.
No, what I'm saying is that those things that you come to realize in this life are not removable. They will be with your immortality, and they will be stages along the way. And that's, you know. So.
Well, you know, I don't know. I haven't been there yet. Meister Eckhart says,
who claim to have been there already.
Yeah.
And then the question is, do you believe them or not? And is what they are saying believable?
The question is, do I believe I absolutely understand what they've said?
Right.
Okay, I'll give a perfect example. I've been reading and rereading what I consider to be one of the greatest writings of Christian mysticism, the Memorial of Angela Foligno. And you know what? The priest, her confessor, who took all of this down, admitted that he didn't understand 30% of what she said. And the fact is, if someone who knew someone so intimately couldn't understand everything, means that we're destined not to. I mean, but it's rare to have that honesty and say, you know, we don't understand. I believe that the writings of Meister Eckhart, the words of Meister Eckhart, are 100% completely valid for Meister Eckhart.
Absolutely.
But as soon as they're transmitted into the written form, they may help us, they may be guideposts or lighthouses along the way, but they are not completely valid for us, because all experience is by definition individual.
Right, and the description is never the thing.
Right, and the description is never the thing described.
I guess you're saying that applies to the text of the Quran. It applies to each and every revelation of every tradition. And so then, who was the revelation for? Was it for the people to follow in the tradition, or was it merely something that was pertained only to the particular avatar that brought it forth?
Well, it was communicated because the avatar knew the value of it and wished to give it. But
Yeah, that's exactly right, which means it has a value that is understandable and can be communicated to people.
To some people. It
Yes.
doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Well,
it
you
doesn't
know,
give it
this-
any. It doesn't give it any kind of absolute.
The fault is primarily, if it's not communicated, is the fault is in many cases, or most cases, the fault of the person who has received the message.
No, I
And
don't think so.
yeah, and has, for some reason or another, been unable to understand it.
I don't buy that.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, who can say that the fault of someone who is deaf is that he can't, that he
No,
won't or can't understand?
That
You
wasn't
know?
what is being said here.
Well,
mean,
what I mean is, people are created across a bell curve. By whatever thing you want to measure, there's a bell curve. And their ability to understand certain kinds of expression is on a bell curve.
Well, not only that, it's limited by language and culture.
Exactly. If the revelation came in a different language or culture, it's going to be, you're going to miss some of the meaning in the expression of it.
That's right, but you don't lay the fault of not being able to understand it entirely at the door of the message.
No,
It's not a fault.
absolutely
It's just a phenomenon. There's no moral fault here.
It's just that it's difficult for the gap between one level and the next to be bridged.
Well, that's right. That's the whole purpose of tradition and all of the practices that are introduced. That's
But the
Yes,
people who
and-
can't,
And,
the
and
people
that's
who
why
can't do that aren't
and that's
evil.
why they need to be refreshed over time. And
Yeah.
as the Quran says, there have been many, and some of them about I have told you, and others I have not.
Mm-hmm.
right.
And the fact, if you find one that doesn't speak to you or is ancient and deals with another culture, with another worldview, it's not their fault, but it's not directed to you. And
That's right.
And the fact that you can't benefit from it isn't your fault.
No, that's right. Now, there is such a thing as willful ignorance.
It isn't
but that's not
necessarily
what
the
we're talking
message's
about.
fault either.
No,
it isn't.
No, it isn't. It's just inoperative. It doesn't mean the message is false. The message is true. It's just incommunicable.
I wasn't laying fault at the people's door.
There's
Don't
no point in
understand
assigning
something. They
fault.
may be listening. They should be listening to another message, or they should be doing something or other else. Who knows? That wasn't my
It doesn't,
input.
you don't know someone's inner life. You don't know what is really where the fault is.
Well, then you're saying that it's pointless to have spiritual masters because they seem to have be adept at having an understanding of the human soul.
No, I think it's unhelpful to try to say that the religion didn't touch everyone completely, or perhaps at all, because of a particular perversion or error in the people who don't get it. It's just that in the world we live in, communication is imperfect, understanding is imperfect, and sometimes it works out for somebody for whatever reason. It may be that as the not the Pentecostals. Well, maybe whoever it is that says there are 144,000 souls are saved, and that's literally it. But there may be people who are here to serve a purpose on the horizontal plane, to be helpful and instructive to others, and
yes,
and they may do so through their faults.
I think the Western monotheistic concept of revelation is inherently problematic. And in fact, there's this passage from a text that I'm currently translating from the German that I think is quite relevant here. And it says, The Greek gods do not speak of themselves. Apollo of Delphi, to whom pilgrims of the most diverse conditions, from kings to beggars, continued to flock for centuries from countries all over the world seeking advice, has never revealed anything about his being or his will, nor has he ever claimed preferential veneration for himself. In this regard, the statement comes to mind, precisely for this reason, God is the great blessed one, as Pindar calls him, because his thoughts are constantly turned to what is outside of himself, to his creation. He alone has nothing to do with himself because he is a priori certain and sure of his being. No dogma declares in the name of these gods how they are to be understood, their attitude towards humanity, or humanity's debt to them. No sacred book determines what one must unconditionally know or believe. Everyone can think of the gods in their own way, as long as they do not withhold the tribute that ancient tradition demands.
Right. And they will think of the gods in their own way.
Well, I would say that the scriptures of tradition spend a lot of time telling you about things that apparently is of little use to you because you discount its value. Well, it's monotheism. Is that the problem? I guess God is not smart enough to know that he shouldn't be providing a religion to people that has statements that can be interpreted as monotheistic.
No, he's providing it to people who are by their nature limited, and he's giving the message to them. That doesn't mean it's the same message for other people.
And it is not the fault of the message. The message is, you might say, couched in terms that the particular audience can understand it.
Yes, fault is in the medium.
But it is not a fault of someone who isn't in part of that audience to not get it.
Well, whoever said it was?
Well, I don't know. I didn't.
I didn't either.
Well, yeah, when we talk about,
you seem to be trying to convince somebody of something you think they feel, when in fact that's not what they feel.
Somebody made the statement that if they don't understand it, or that it isn't helpful to them, it's their fault.
Well, it can be
that way.
Sometimes it can be because they don't have the necessary humility or whatever. It's not just the fault of the message.
No, but if the message isn't directed to them, it's not their fault that they don't get it.
Well, it may be directed to them, and they may have character problems that prevent them from accepting it.
That's true, but it's also
who created this?
Accepted to them.
Who created this man who is unable to get the message?
He didn't create his, you might say, obstinacy in not accepting the truth. That wasn't what he created.
I don't like to think of it that way.
It's obstinacy and fault, and it's somebody's fault. Making something somebody's fault is really an excuse for something. It's not. It has no explanatory value.
Yeah,
well,
I don't.
When Noah tried to tell everybody to get aboard the ark and they decided not to, I mean, it wasn't Noah's fault, I don't think. Nor was it God's fault.
Well, but the ark wasn't big enough for everybody.
At any rate, I like to think of it ideally in terms of fruit. Some people like oranges and hate apples. Other people love apples and hate oranges. We should approach religion in the same way. It's a matter of preference, and we should accept the beautiful, colorful rainbow of diversity of different tastes and interpretations. And that is why there are such a multitude of religions, because some are uniquely suited to the particular time and place or state of the soul of one particular person rather than another. The problem comes when we say, I'm going to make a holy war because I love oranges and I'm going to kill all the infidel apple lovers.
Well, I think that, that's not a problem of any of the people in this group. We're all perennialists, I think. And we certainly don't believe that way.
I was thinking about the fact that there have been two sort of religious traditions that have been brought to me, given where I live and the time I was born, and it initially was the Southern Baptist Church.
Mm-hmm.
And they provided certain teachings and practices that were of value, and certain notions about the afterlife that were of value. And then Presbyterian and eventually Islam, which also, these revelations are from God, are meant to help people better understand and better act,
Yes, exactly.
So they're not without benefit and purpose, but they were for me at a certain time in my life, but there are a lot of traditions that aren't. I mean, the Native American Indians and the Judaism, etc., that just never came my way, or I never came their way. So I don't think there's anything wrong with them necessarily, but.
Well, and given that we don't live in close proximity, either in space or time, to the one who revealed the truth, we're not going to get all of it. And it may be that there are expressions of the truth we can get, even if they come from somewhere else. It's our job to have love and goodwill and, try to complete your understanding of reality and of holiness and perfect yourself in love and truth and all that. But as soon as you think you own the truth, you're in trouble.
I've actually spent a considerable amount of my life not just studying, but practicing just about every living tradition outside of, Shinto, Zoroastrianism, and, mystical Judaism. And one thing that I've come away realizing is they're all flawed and they're all true. There's good in all of the paths, and there are horrible, historically contingent things in all of them as well. So it really comes down to a matter of being able to separate oneself eventually from the rigid dogmatic texts and history of these religions, and simply realize one, ultimately, at the end of the day, is alone face to face before that which created them, and they have to basically stare that energy or essence or void or whatever you want to call it straight on. And until they have the courage to do that, there's always going to be a wall in front of them.
Right. Yeah, the cloud of unknowing, even the name is instructive. Because as long as everything you think you know is like a blind spot. It doesn't mean that there's no truth in what you think you know, but there's always something you don't know that God would will that you know.
So let's get on to a couple of questions before we end for the day. Let's actually maybe start with question 2. Do you sometimes get the feeling that you're living inside of a simulation? When reality no longer feels real, how may one recover the capital R real?
Oh, I think there's value in experiencing your reality as seeming to be not real. But I don't ever feel that I've been living inside a simulation. Sometimes perhaps an illusion, but not a simulation.
Well, can we say the same thing here?
What same thing?
Illusion and simulation?
Well, yes, you could, but simulation posits a simulator, and because of where technology has gone, I'm sort of reluctant to want to find a way to use that word.
Understood.
When I formulated the question, I certainly wanted there to be that ambiguity, both because of certain modern ideas that, either we are or could be living in an actual technological simulation, but also because, some of these ideas go back to the Gnostic heresies and, the fact that basically the demiurgos created a sort of evil simulated world.
Oh yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
right.
Well, yeah, and so there's a certain deception in there. And of course the devil is deceptive too. But it's sometimes hard to know what's deceptive and what is just inability to see clearly. What's the deception and what's the inability to see clearly. But I felt like the world I live in didn't feel real many times, and I think that's a good thing.
Good thing. How is it good to feel like you're in a world that's not real, that you're living in a...
Well, it really isn't that the world isn't real. It's that it must be something other than merely what I see. But anyway, yeah, it's not like taking LSD and saying, oh, is that thing I see really real? But it's not entirely different, because the whole thing of an external reality is problematic.
Yes. That it's a simulation or it's external reality. Can you distinguish the two?
Not these days.
Not lately, yes.
We're going to have a lot more to learn about that as the years progress here.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stories that people have been living their life in are collapsing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Well, for instance, the whole idea that we have of the rightness of living in a modern society that has more or less no longer has any anchor in any reality that one can perceive in the heart. And you might say the people who do perceive that are very, very rare at this time. And so people live in a world that is manufactured in order to more or less tame their undesirable endeavors. And some of it may have some reason to be that is valid. A lot of it just simply is tailored to keep in check a certain population of people or a certain particular group of people.
Or to extract coins from their pockets.
Right. And so, but a lot of this is collapsing. I mean, used to, we would turn on TV in its infancy and we would watch Walter Cronkite and different people like that, and they would tell us what the reality of the world was.
And that's the way it is.
That's right.
That's the way he ended it every day. Yeah.
Yep.
And then, but slowly, these things are beginning to fall to pieces. And people are beginning to question all of the different aspects of it that they have been taught and has been manufactured for them. And some of it is good and some of it isn't. And they are no longer can find any authority in the world that supposedly keeps them centered.
Or that they will recognize.
Their religious viewpoints have been so atrophied that they no longer have the effectiveness that they did earlier on.
Mm-hmm. It's true that the world we live in right now is not nearly as supporting of being a spiritual person as it used to be. I mean, it used to be that there were all of these nudgings that you got from your environment.
And there is one thing that can be said, though. The falseness of a lot of what is going on now has become so blatantly obvious
I hope
that,
so.
that more and more people are beginning to understand or to feel the loss of the spiritual form and that they had earlier. And it was asked, somebody asked earlier in one of these questions, as was the exoteric viewpoint necessary? And I think it's just like at a very early age, you have to hold a child's hand to cross the street.
Yeah.
Because he does not understand the potential of dangers involved in it. And you certainly don't turn him loose with things like weapons and you name it when he doesn't understand any of the consequences. And so at any rate, that, we're in a stage like that. And we are being told by various people, whether it be news agencies, whether it be other people of very exotic viewpoint and other traditions, or whether it's warfare between traditions, or whether it's warfare between people and ethnic groups, and so on and so forth. All of these things can't be any longer sorted out easily. So we're going to invent an AI God who will be so all-encompassing in factual information that nobody can question his authority. And if anybody does question it, they will be eliminated in some way or another from the society. Okay, that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I don't know about eliminated, but it could get to that. But the thing is, the people who are communicating to multiple people, like news reporters or authors, they used to be more interested in discovering the truth, even if it wasn't spiritual truth. They were eager to find out what's really going on and report on it and stuff like that. And now we have people whose motives are all over the place.
Right.
And they're not communicating for the sake of truth. They're communicating for the sake of personal gain or control. And there's always been some of those, but we've got a lot of them now. And it's always been that way to a certain extent, but things are more unstable now.
So, I don't think in terms too much of doing something that's somehow or another going to have a big impact in the world.
Well, I don't
I'm interested in that. I guess what I am glad for in this day and time is that you can become an initiate, you can follow a spiritual path, you can in fact do the practices of invoking the divine name, whether you be a Hindu, a Buddhist, or a Muslim, and that through the feature of perennialism, you can in fact see how this all at a higher level makes sense.
Right. And I think that's particularly useful at this point in time.
Yeah.
Right. And so my path, I guess, if you would call it path, is to take those things that have been given me and try to utilize them to the fullest extent.
Yeah. I think
not be worrying about so much what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
I would agree with you, and the way I would state it sometimes is that we can talk about all of the bad things that are happening in this world, or be aware of them and be sad about them, and we can envision things getting worse and worse, like as we sometimes say, the world going to hell in a handbasket.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, because of the path we have available to us, we have the capacity to detach ourselves in an interior space and think, as I was learned from a saint in Upper Egypt in 2003, the world is always becoming, and I'm always becoming too, but there's something in me which is not becoming, but which simply is.
Right.
And that's the most important aspect, to be able to detach yourself from all that's becoming when you need to.
Yeah. When you look out across the world and see what's wrong, the first thing you should feel is sadness. If the first thing you feel is anger, you're in trouble. You may need to feel anger somewhere along the line.
There's totally anger, I guess, on occasions, but
yeah, I just mean that if your go-to is anger because you don't like what you see, then you've got a problem. If your go-to is sad because you see that it's sad, that's more normal and healthier.
Well, your go-to is to avoid the pitfalls of what is happening all around you. That's not particularly bad. It's just like not wanting to be standing on the street corner where the piano falls.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, whatever you see, you try to turn to good, but it's not worth dwelling on the bad. It's being sorry for those who are affected by it and feeling sad for the error and the people misguided by it. And there's no reason to get angry unless you're in a position where it's out to get you. Even then,
when I encounter other traditions, if I discover that they cannot accept a viewpoint that goes beyond their exoteric viewpoint, in other words, perennialism would bring up all sorts of red flags in their mind, because it would be I guess you might say, a kind of movement from what is the good in their notion, in their
minds, yeah.
And so what do? Well, I try to discover what in their understanding of their tradition is something that they can be helped with, and that their faith in it can be revived.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Yeah. Good for you.
I don't ever tell them that I'm Muslim, and I don't ever tell them that I'm any of these things.
Yes, it's most helpful to try to communicate with people in their own world.
Yes. So I worked all the years that I worked at the highway department. I was a Muslim, and I hired Muslims, but they didn't know I was Muslim.
They didn't need to.
No. I could say things that would refurbish some of their viewpoint about their own tradition.
Sure. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And so that, and that's about all I've been able to do, or figure out that.
That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that is about all you can do, and that is a good thing to do.
Now, on our next call, we're going to talk about what's good and right in the world.
And also George Bataille, so we should read your Wikipedia article about him, just in case you're not familiar with his writings, which I'm not. But we will reconvene if we all survive and the world survives.
On Thursday, inshallah.
Well,
on Tuesday.
Tuesday. Today is Thursday.
Tuesday.
Today
is Thursday.
Oops.
I have trouble keeping these things straight.
Yeah. Tuesday, Thursday, whatever.
I ran across a name and someone strongly recognizing a certain one of a number of videos he made back in the day. I mean, I don't mean modern videos, films, I guess. And I watched part of one, including the part that was recommended. It was pretty good, but I don't have his name right in front of me, so Maybe I'll mention it in case anybody's interested next time.
Next time.
Okay, good. Looking forward to next time.